Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Nicole Lamberson. I was trained as a physician assistant and I volunteer doing outreach for the film Medicating Normal. And I host conversations like this one today. Our guest today is Naftal Benisty. He is a trained social worker from the Netherlands and a survivor of benzodiazepines and Z-drugs sleeping pills. Some of you might recognize him as the host of the podcast Benzotired, where he spotlights benzodiazepine harms as part of his advocacy work. So welcome, Naftal. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I think to start, maybe for those who don't know you, I know it's always such a loaded question and it's like all of our stories are so long and convoluted, but maybe we could just sort of jump in and you could let everybody know, why your story is relevant to, the medicating normal conversation.
Right. So I developed severe tinnitus after contracting Lyme disease, and that got treated. I did get symptoms, kind of scary symptoms from the Lyme disease. That got treated. Then I got like severe tinnitus, and I couldn't sleep. The noise, the panic, and the uncertainty if that would be a permanent thing. The tinnitus, I just went haywire. And I remember that I really didn't want to go to my GP for drugs. So I just tried some, remedies from the drugstore and stuff. But after 2 months of barely sleeping, I was just losing my mind. It was like I never dealt with an insomnia that severe. So it's like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to survive this. So desperately, I went to my GP and I got prescribed benzodiazepines.
Mm. Was the tinnitus, from Lyme, or was it from the treatment?
It could be anything really. It could be from the Lyme disease. It could be from the treatment, or it could just be the stress of having Lyme disease. It was like a big health scare. And
Okay.
anything can cause tinnitus.
Okay, so you finally just have devastating insomnia. You've tried all these things, it's not working. You're desperate for
Yeah,
sleep. You
I'm
go to the
desperate.
doctor. And at this time, were you a social worker already
Yeah,
or
yeah,
yes, okay.
yeah.
So I'm wondering, you accept this prescription from benzodiazepines, and do you know what a benzodiazepine is from your social work training? Like,
No,
no.
no, no.
Okay.
I'd never heard of the word benzodiazepine.
Mhm.
In this country, they use the generics mostly, so everything ends with Pam or Lamb. So I had heard vaguely about Pams, and I thought it was to kind of like take the edge off for people. So I did have some clients that were on a Pam, but I didn't really think about that. I never really needed anything to sleep. I never needed drugs to like wind down. I just thought there were benign drugs, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of my thinking in asking you the question because, I trained medically. And in hindsight, I think I look back and I feel like my training was even sort of indoctrination a little bit into believing that like medicine has answers for us. And sometimes they do, but especially like um in psychiatry with you being a social worker, you were like really involved in like the mental health field and like probably seeing people taking these medications. So do you feel like it made it even more benign to you?
Yeah, because I thought back in those days that some people just needed antidepressants. Apparently, I never needed them. I never really struggled with depression or insomnia, so I just thought, that's nice for these people that they can take a drug and it helps
Mhm.
them.
Yeah. So sidebar, and we'll get back to your story, but in your training in the Netherlands, were you trained as a social worker, to think that there was a chemical imbalance in the brain and all of that?
I I received no training on that. My education was solely like dealing with mental health, as in what could I provide them, and anything medical or serious would be addressed by a psychiatrist.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So back to your story. You get a benzodiazepine for this devastating insomnia. Which one? And like, what was your starting dose?
Which ones, I would have to say. So I
Oh,
started off with oxazepam,
okay.
which is I knew nothing about. I know it's a kind of a less potent benzo, short acting half-life. It did nothing. So after 2 days of trying that, I called my GP and I said, this drug isn't working. What else do you got? And then I got nitrazepam, which is a pretty potent benzo. And I got some scary side effects. I had wet my bed twice. I couldn't move my legs when I woke up, and my sleep was still kind of bad. So after 2 days, I'm like, this isn't working either. Then this is interesting in my kind of journey because mostly generics are prescribed here in terms of the name. And then I get this drug called Dormicum, which I think is a very different kind of class of drug, but it's midazolam, otherwise known as Versed. So I got
Wow.
Versed. And that drug scared the shit out of me because I remember taking that drug, being knocked out, waking up 2 hours later or three, having no sense of sleep. Like, wasn't it like 10 p.m. a second ago? And then I was like, okay, but maybe I need to try this before it works or something. And after 2 days, I'm like, I'm going to write suicide notes. I'm like, this is bad. This is bad. So I call my GP. I'm like, this Dormicum, that's making me suicidal. What else do you got? So with the gift of hindsight, my GP should be like, okay, so you've wet your bed, you're becoming suicidal. Maybe benzodiazepines are not something that I should give you. And then
Yeah.
he gives me this drug called lormetazepam, which I found out like years later, it's not even approved in the US. It's like 2 or 3 countries that it's prescribed. And it's kind of like an Ativan-like drug, I think, very potent. And what that does, it does help me sleep for like 2 hours or three. And I
Mhm.
just pop pills throughout the night. I'm like, I need to sleep. I need to sleep. And I'm like, it's just 1 milligram. Like, it's just 1 little milligram.
Mhm.
Um, so whereas I've heard with a lot of people that are put on benzos, it's like, oh, this is a miracle drug. That was not the case for me. I was like really tired still. And I was like, okay, I'm getting some kind of sleep here, but my problem is tinnitus, and I don't want to be dependent on drugs to sleep. This, my problem is tinnitus, so I need to get that fixed. Long story short, I got a diagnosis, but not really a fix.
Mhm.
So even though I hated the fact that I would have to be using these pills, I was like, okay, I guess there's no other alternative for me. So months go by. I don't really have, I'm depressed. I'm not well. I was super healthy before all of this and happy. I never struggled with these things. And then that drug gets out of stock. I'm like, okay, but I need something to sleep. And then I get flurazepam, brand name Delmain. And that's when I have my miracle moment because it's such a long acting benzo. I'm like, oh, I'm sleeping again. And
Mhm.
then I'm on that for years for, a very high dose.
Wow. So I probably already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways because everybody answers the same. But did your doctor, when he was prescribing you all these things, like give you any warnings or information or anything at the time?
No, he did say that they could be addictive, but what is addictive? Is it like smoking? I'll have a shitty week and move on. Like, what's the,
Yeah.
I didn't have the concept of addiction. Interestingly, though, and now I understand, but I didn't back then, he said I could get in trouble by prescribing you this. I was like, that is odd. Why would a doctor be in trouble for a prescription?
Yeah.
But
Wow.
no warnings, nothing. No.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you said Versed, I'm like, man, they go hard in the Netherlands.
Yes,
That's
that's
like our
crazy.
pre-medicants for surgery over here,
I
and
know. Also here, I didn't know anything about benzos or that they would be used in hospitals, or I just thought I was getting a sleeping pill.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's just so many people and myself included. They're like hindsight and all of this is just like, wow. Oh, wow. I didn't,
Yes.
and you piece it all together when it's just much, much too late.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you bring up the concept of language, I had the same experience too. Nobody told me benzos were addictive when they prescribed to me, but in my medical training, I had known they were addictive. But I think that's like such a huge part of our activism, at least, at Medicating Normal, at Benzodiazepine Information Coalition, maybe on your podcast too, is to inform people of the differences in terms so that people realize they're at risk. Because when you say addictive, right, you give people this false sense of security, that like they're laying in bed taking their benzo every night, but they're like, I'm not addicted. I'm take one pill just like the doctor told me every
Yeah.
single night. That's not addiction in most people's minds. And so they feel like they're safe from harm. I mean,
Right.
was that what you experienced as well?
Definitely. And I think the biggest lie to me was, knowing what I know now is that there's no such thing as a sleeping pill, and a benzodiazepine is not a sleeping pill. It's a tranquilizer.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Mhm.
like, I think that is something that I firmly believe is that we need to wake up and know that there's no such thing as a sleeping pill.
Yeah.
Because
And
people will casually say, "Oh, I take something to sleep, a
mhm.
sleeping pill," but it's not.
Yeah. And if you read the research on benzodiazepines and Z-drugs, which are the ones that are mostly referred to as sleeping pills, they actually destroy your sleep
Yes,
in the long term.
yes,
They
yes,
they they're not putting you in restorative sleep. It's much different sleep than what happens naturally. And
exactly.
then when
Yeah,
you try to get off of them, oh my gosh, what it does to your sleep, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So you're physically dependent, which for
Which I
people who
know
are
nothing about.
watching, yeah, from taking the drugs long term, this is the term that is appropriate to use, not
Yeah,
addiction. Physical dependence is when your body physiologically adapts to the presence of the drug taken, as prescribed. So you've taken this benzo now for sleep for how long?
I think about 5 years. I'm on
Okay.
like really high dosages of the benzo,
Mhm.
and my life is not much better for it. I would have to say, once I got switched to the long acting benzo, like I said, first I thought, oh, this is great. I'm sleeping again. It's not as great as it used to be prior to all of this, but I felt like I was getting my life back a little bit. But gradually over time, tolerance happens, which I knew nothing about. And the side effects were getting more severe. I became very fatigued. I was like, oh gosh, and the days that I'd be tired, those would increase.
Mhm.
So after about 4 years, there's a lot of things happening in my personal life. Long story, anyways, I go to a psychologist. I'm like, I'm so tired. I'm
Mhm.
always tired. I never wake up rested. I'm so tired. I have tinnitus, blah, 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 blah. My life is a mess. I got divorced, blah, blah, blah. And she did not say to me like, oh, you're on a really high level of benzo that may be causing all of that. Instead of that, she was like, oh, you've got chronic fatigue syndrome and you're going to
Mhm.
have to deal with that. And I'll give you tools how to manage your fatigue. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm always tired. I guess that's my thing.
Yeah.
But a year later, I'm like, this is not a quality of life. There's so many days that I'm just laying in bed or laying on the couch, being not productive, calling in sick all the time. I'm like, this is no quality of life. Something is not right here. And I was like, okay, I think the drug isn't really working anymore. So again, with my GP, I just quickly Google, like, maybe there's an alternative to this PAM that I'm using. And I read Z-drugs. I call my GP. I'm like, hey, this drug isn't working anymore. Could you prescribe me a Z-drug? And so he just prescribes me. He doesn't tell me that it shouldn't, cold turkey the benzo. Doesn't do much for my sleep. And a week
Yeah.
later, I have like full blown psychosis, everything.
Yeah, because what was the equivalence now that we know that all these drugs have equivalences between
Yeah,
what you had become physically dependent on and the Z drug? Like Z drugs are not that potent
right.
comparatively if you were on some high dose. So basically, you probably cold turkey like a huge
Yes.
amount and then just went to a
Yeah.
tiny little bit
Yes.
on. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Which you
And
wouldn't
then,
have had knowledge of at the time.
no,
Yeah.
no, not at all. And my GP never warned me, like, you can't just quit this drug, or
Mhm.
maybe you need some help. You've been on these drugs for so long. Apparently, it's not really working for you. No advice, nothing. So
Wow. Yeah,
that
because
was
they don't
crazy.
know. We now from
Yeah,
interacting with so many people, the medical community isn't trained on this. It's like a huge gap in medical knowledge. So he probably had no idea that he was, basically going to put you in a huge cold turkey. When
yeah.
you look back at your story, did you ever determine like what the Valium equivalence of the benzo was before you switched over to the Z drug?
if I knew the equivalents now or then.
Now, I mean, have you
Oh
figured it?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's Clean Calc and there's the Ashton manual, as you know. I think the Ashton manual states 45 milligrams of Valium, and Clean Calc has a pretty broad range for Delmane, which it ranges between 15 and 120 milligrams of Valium.
Yeah. Okay. So you were on a significant amount, and
Yes.
then you just went to like a standard Z drug
Yeah.
dose when you
Yeah, like
switched.
5 milligrams or two, something. I can't remember. I was on it for like a week, and then I became psychotic for the first
Mhm.
time in my whole life. And with
Yeah.
the gift of hindsight, now I have names for these things. Like I had depersonalization, derealization. I couldn't stop crying. I was inconsolable. I called the suicide hotline. I was a mess. I called my GP. And it took me like hours of wailing that I realized, wait, it's because I switched the drug. This is not
Mhm.
me. This is some crazy stuff happening because I switched to the drug. And long story short, I didn't get the help that I needed. Like, unless I was going to jump off a roof, no one was going to show up. So I reinstate the 90 milligrams of flurazepam, and I'm better.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel better. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of surprised that you actually, I mean, in the first place, going back a little bit, all of the fatigue and the symptoms and stuff, like you kind of had a sense that it was from the drug,
Not at
even
all.
though, no,
Not at all. I thought it was sorry. I thought it was my tinnitus because by then I didn't know it was a neurological thing.
yeah,
And because I got prescribed benzo so quickly, I really truly believed that I had lost my natural ability to sleep again. So I really
mhm,
thought like I need this drug because I have
okay,
this condition. I
mhm,
never matched like the fatigue with the benzo at all.
yeah. So you
Keep
just
it
switched
clean.
to the Z drug because you felt like it wasn't working as well as it had in the first
Right.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, with your counselor or psychotherapist saying, "Oh, you have chronic fatigue." I wonder, because that was my experience too, just being so tired. Like I remember one of my roommates said to me, like, I've never met anybody that just like sleeps or like lays around as much as you do,
Right.
like how many people are out there right now just walking around in that state feeling that bad and not having a clue that it's
Right.
the
Right.
medication that they're taking, and then some doctor or therapist reinforcing that by saying, oh, it's chronic fatigue, it's all these other
Right. Yeah.
kind of bucket diagnoses um, that people get, a functional neurological disorder. Like, we don't know what's wrong with you, so we'll just call it this.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So you reinstate, you feel more stable. At this point, now have you figured out, like, okay, it's the drug? No.
No, no, I feel like there's a connection, but I'm like, something must be mentally wrong with me because I
Mhm.
have this psychosis. I was like, that is so odd. That is so unlike me. And something is wrong, but I don't know what is wrong with me exactly. So I do really like cry out for help. I'm like, I need help because this is an unlivable situation. Something is wrong with me. This tinnitus. I've never met anyone who had such severe problems with tinnitus as me, as I was still kind of like thinking it was the tinnitus. So we
Mhm.
fast forward because there's waiting lists in this country. So it takes like a few months before I get like help. I find specific help for like tinnitus and which I would have never found because in their kind of titles like for deaf people, I was like, I'm
Mhm.
not deaf. I just have noise. So I
Yeah.
get into this, it's a psychiatric kind of thing, but it's a pandemic. It's all online, which is fine. I'm too tired to travel anyway. I get cognitive behavioral therapy, which was nice. It was very educational. It's kind of like 5 years too late, but I was like, okay, so this is actually what they know about tinnitus. It was just very educational. And then I got cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep, which was also very informative. And then I kind of realized, oh, there's no pill for sleep and that my body should be able to do this on its own. Of
Mhm.
course, they wouldn't tell me then, like, oh, you've been severely damaged by benzo. So the cognitive behavioral therapy is not going to like alleviate some of your future insomnia. But I was like, okay, I'm ready to get off this drug and try it. Still
Yeah.
not having any clue.
Yeah. It's like when you try to do therapies that you should have done before, in the first place, when you're damaged in this way from the drugs, it's like flicking water at a bonfire or something.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
So this is your plan. You've got this new information. Now you're going to get off of the drug and you're going to try this therapy. So how
Yeah.
does it go?
Okay, so this is then the first official attempt for me to come off of the benzodiazepines. I have a psychiatrist. She's very unfriendly. We don't connect. She's doing her job, and I'm just, okay, well, you studied for this, so, you know, and she tapers me very rapidly, but she's very rude to me. She's like, you're super addictive. You're super addicted, and you should know how addicted you are, and this stuff will cause dementia. And I'm like, and already then I was like, am I addicted? That's such a strange word, you know, but okay,
Mhm.
if you say that I'm addicted, I guess I'm addicted. It's a very rapid taper, and she brings me down, I think, from 90 milligrams to maybe 30 or something like that within a few weeks. I'm
Mm.
like getting no sleep. She prescribes me Seroquel to help me sleep. Quetiapine doesn't work, so I quit taking that. And then she's like, okay, you need to be made aware of how addicted you are. So I'm going to prescribe you 14 milligrams of diazepam, which is Valium, and I'll give you 7 2 milligram tablets. I'm like, that is so not practical. You know, I'm already not sleeping. So then I have to, you know, I have to pee, I have to drink it with a lot of water. No, I'm prescribing you, you know, 7 tablets to take immediately. Okay. And then I think within a week, I have like another kind of psychosis, crying, I give up. I'm like, this is not, like, I'm getting zero sleep. I'm
Mhm.
going mad. I'm going insane. This is just not doable. So I reinstate, and then I get forwarded to an addiction facility.
Yeah. I the doctors who like call the patients addicted and then are mean to them and blame, I mean, it's just victim blaming, it's like if you're going to be mad at anybody, be mad at the system that does this to people without warning. But that's
Right.
what it is. They blame the patient, and it's like then we become this annoying, thorn in their ass or whatever that they have to deal with. And it's like, oh, you're this complicated patient. And it's like, well, let's
Yeah.
stop doing this to people then. And we like the doctors won't have to deal with it, you know?
Right.
Uh
Definitely.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry that you got treated that way. It's wrong. It's just unfair,
It
you know.
is. It is. But at least now I know.
Hmm.
I have to wait for the addiction facility to be able to help me.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it takes a couple of weeks, not that long. And I'm like, I feel like such a loser. I'm like, why can't I quit these drugs? That's just weird. So I do all these stupid things. I'm like, maybe hops and valerian will help me sleep while I get off of this. I want natural stuff, nothing addictive. And I basically, what I do, because I'm like, an addiction facility, that is intense. Like, I'm
Yeah.
ashamed. If I can prevent me from going in there, I'd rather come off myself. I'm like, I'll just
Mhm.
do it, and I'll give it another go. And I go from 90 to 30 milligrams in like 2 days. And I'm having these little seizures during the day. I'm barely sleeping, but I'm like, okay, I've read in the insert pamphlet that there will be some rebound insomnia. So maybe I'll sleep bad for a few weeks. That's my kind of reasoning at the time.
Mhm.
And then I remembered that I tried going from 30 to 15, but I would get so sick and these weird, like, so scary, such scary symptoms. I'm like, okay, this is not working for me. So apparently I'm stuck at 30. And that's how I kind of like come into like an addiction facility outpatient. But I'm like, okay, this is my whole story. You know, I can't get off of these meds. Please help me.
Yeah.
And that's where I just got treated even worse. I almost
Yeah.
died because of their advice. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was bad. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so at any point in time during this, like you're feeling all this shame, you're sort of questioning, like, why do I need an addiction facility for this medicine that my doctor,
Right.
it's like
Yes.
things are churning in your head. It's confusing. Did you ever jump online and like find the groups or find
I wish I
anything?
had. I wish I'd just gone online instead of going into psychiatry. That would have saved me a lot of drama for sure.
Yeah.
I think I was like, what do I even look for? I thought I was the only one struggling with coming off of these drugs. Like, I didn't even know anything about support groups. I'm like, I'm going to
Mhm.
specialists. They should know, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
That was my
Yeah.
reasoning. Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important. Like, Oh man, if we could catch people before this phase, like when they're stable and they haven't done anything and they haven't let psychiatry tell them all the wrong advice. But it's like,
Right.
how do you get to them, other than what we're doing? We're trying to put this information out
Yeah.
there, but I
Yeah.
fear all the time that it's like an echo chamber. Like maybe it's not reaching people, who we need to reach. And I don't know. I don't know how to get to them.
It's challenging because I do have a friend who is actively on benzos, who knows my story, but he's like, I don't want to deal with this, Sonia. I'm just going to keep taking this drug and I'm not going to be as sick as you are. So it's
Mhm.
because it's so insidious, right? So if someone would have come up to me and be like, okay, those drugs are really, really bad and you need to taper and this is what they do, I'd be like, but that's crazy. The doctor is prescribing this. So this should
Yeah.
be safe, right? So
Yeah,
it's really, yeah,
some it's that enforces, because most people trust their physician, first and foremost. But it's also, I think, a little bit of cognitive dissonance, like people don't want to know on some level that like something bad and scary might be around the corner. So it's kind of like
right,
denial is a safe space to be. But
right.
all right, so now you're staring down a addiction center
Yep.
and
Yep.
you've managed to get your dose down at least. So
Yeah.
what's it like in there?
Oh my God, it was horrible. It was so horrible. I've dealt with like a few people that work there. So a psychiatrist, I mean, she was nice, but she was very honest. Like, I don't know a lot about benzodiazepine withdrawal. At least she told me that, this happens. It's physical dependence. I get more patients that struggle to come off of them. So she presented me with a few options. I'll never forget it. Like you can do like a micro taper through like a special pharmacy that we have. You can do an inpatient program where we get you off within a certain amount of time. And I was like, but I sleep shitty. So either I sleep shitty over there or in my own house. I would prefer my own house. So it didn't make
Yeah.
any sense to me to stay there with whatever addicts would be there. And then she said, well, we also have an addiction specialist that works for us. I'm like, oh, that sounds good, because maybe this person will know about benzodiazepines. And so I have a meeting with him, and there was a language barrier because he's not a native, not English, but I think he's from Morocco or something. I tell my entire story, and he's like, okay, well, I'll give you Valium, and then you can quit with Valium. I'm like, I've had Valium before. It didn't really work out for me. Are there alternatives? And he's like, yeah, I can give you lorazepam, which is Ativan. And mind you, I'm on the mother of the longest half-life benzo ever, even longer acting than Valium. And he's like, I'll give you Ativan. It's just going to take you a little bit longer to taper. I'm like, okay, sounds promising. So I take the
Mm.
Ativan home. I have this crazy wild week with like the vivid dreams, a lot of shakiness. I'm like, this is not working. I'm so sick. I'm so
Mm.
sick. This isn't working. And so I see him again a week later and I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. I'm so sick. Just give me the Valium. Just give me the Valium. I'm so done with this. I just want to
Yeah.
get off of it.
Yeah.
And then he gives me the Valium. I tried for like 2 days and I get kind of like my first high in a very sick way, because he told me to instantly switch to Valium. So
Mhm.
I try Valium for like 15 milligrams or something. So he got the equivalency right of the 30, but I was on 90 a month before. So obviously I was going way too fast.
Mhm.
And then after 2 days, I'm so done. The Valium is making me sick. I'm not sleeping. So I just decide to cold turkey. I inform them. He's like, cool, good that you're cold turkeying. Fine. We'll check in
Yeah.
with you next week or call us when you need us. And then I think it took about a week for me to like almost die,
Mhm.
like really
And
physically die.
yeah, what did that look like? I mean, what started happening?
So I was already having these little seizures during the day, and I thought maybe this is temporary. It's just something that I have to like power through or something. But what started to happen, I think after a few days, maybe 6 or 7 days, which makes sense with the half-life and everything.
Mhm.
I hadn't slept for like 2 or 3 days. So I was like really sick from not sleeping. I was like, I'm so exhausted. And my cognitive behavioral therapy is telling me like the memory of that, like, your body will fall asleep eventually because it needs that. And then I remember this night that I was having heart palpitations throughout the day for the first time. And then by nightfall, my heart was going so indescribably fast, like a mouse. Like
Yeah.
I had grand mal seizures. I was like so contracted with all of my muscles.
Mm.
And I just felt like death. It was like I was dying. And then I
Yeah.
was imagining jumping out of the window, because out of my bedroom window, the suffering was so severe and just indescribable for people that haven't been through this. I was like, I need relief. I need to call an ambulance. I need to do something. Something is really wrong. And I was like really imagining jumping out of my bedroom window, which is on the second floor. I was already like imagining jumping face down so that my head would crack open and I'd be in a coma. At least I would have relief. And
Yeah.
I was like really planning on doing that for real. And I was like, oh, but then tomorrow my partner will find my brain splattered all over the front door. Maybe I shouldn't do that. I was like, what do? I don't know what to do. And then I took like 15 milligrams of flurazepam, and within 30 minutes, it was like all of those symptoms went away. And I slept for a few hours. I was like, okay, this was a setback. I'm still thinking this is a setback. I'm still going to do the cold turkey. But then the cycle of all that suffering and all those symptoms came back. I'm like, okay, I don't think I can cold turkey this. I think I'm dying.
Yeah.
And I was just wildly out of my mind. I was like, okay, I want to come off. And my addiction specialist told me 50 milligrams of Valium. I'll just take 7. I'll meet him halfway. I wasn't thinking clearly.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And that resulted in months of acute withdrawal, burning skin, night sweats, no sleep. I wasn't eating, nothing.
Mhm.
I was shaky the whole time. I couldn't walk. It was just torture.
Yeah. But
Torture.
you stayed in that state for months.
For months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just what, on 7 milligrams of Valium, just
I
trying
was
to,
still cutting. I was like on 7 milligrams, and I was like, okay, but maybe I should take it slower. Mind you, again, I have no knowledge on how to do this.
Mhm.
And I remember that I asked my addiction specialist, like, what can I expect in this withdrawal in terms of symptoms? And he said to me, like, you can have some blurred vision. I'm like, is that it? Okay, that is it.
Okay.
And I would call them. I'm like, I'm really sick. Something is wrong. I can't walk. I didn't know the term burning skin. So I was like, my arms are on fire. My skin is on fire. And the next day I'm freezing. And I think I had a stroke because I would have this nosebleed that just wouldn't stop for hours. I was so sick. And they were like telling me, just power through. You're taking an awful long time to get off. So I was thinking this is just me. And maybe this is a temporarily thing or whatever. Like maybe this will go away within a few weeks, but it just wouldn't stop. It was relentless every day, no sleep, maybe 1 or 2 hours, restless leg syndrome, like the whole list,
Mhm. Yeah. Did you have akathisia as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
God. So, I mean, you already answered my next question, is like, what was the doctor saying when you're reporting all this stuff to him? But what about the people in your life did you have a partner living with you at the time,
Yes,
or?
yes,
Yeah.
he saw it all. He saw everything. And maybe he thought like me, like maybe this just takes a few weeks or something, and maybe it will go away. But I
Mhm.
was just out of my mind, psychotic, maybe even.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of that time is kind of blurred and blocked because it was so
Yeah.
traumatic.
Yeah.
It was just,
And man,
there's,
the window, there's something about the window. I can't tell you how many people have wanted to jump out of the window, self
yeah,
included. That was like one of my ruminations, but also
right.
many people that I've supported as well. It must be a benzo thing, you
Yeah,
just want to escape the
yeah,
suffering in any way
yeah,
possible. It's so bad.
right.
All right. So now you're essentially just damaging your nervous system, just white knuckling in this horrible state of
Yeah,
withdrawal.
yep.
And at what point do you decide like this isn't sustainable anymore, or
Yeah, I think it's a few months in, and I'm like, this is not stopping. This is endless. I can't live like this. I was like, and something is, I think I did realize at some point, like something is off. Like, how is the addiction facility letting me suffer this way? This is inhumane. Something is wrong. This is not blurred vision. This is like my body is on fire and something is off.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I need to, and I was really sick and cognitively declined also because of the severe lack of sleep. I was like, I need to go on this. Now I'm like, I need to go online and maybe there's someone like me that has the same thing. I was like,
Mhm.
what do I even look for? I was like, deathly ill. Like, I want to die.com. Like, where do I go? Yeah, where do I go? And that was the
Yeah.
first time I'm like, I need to like look into this drug. It's called a benzodiazepine. It took me like 10 times to pronounce it. I was like, okay, so maybe I should look up benzodiazepine damage, something. And the
Mhm.
first thing that I found was a book actually by Jack Hobson's DuPont called The
Oh,
Benzo.
yeah.
I'm like,
Mhm.
why would someone write a book about this? I'm like, that's interesting. And then I kind of like swiftly go through the book and like 3.5 years of a taper. That's insane. This man is crazy or whatever.
Uh-huh.
I'm like still not believing the whole thing. And then he says something about an Ashton manual. And so I Google that and my world just falls apart. I'm like, she's describing me. This is what's going
Mhm.
on with me. And then the whole litany, like, how could this happen to me? Why didn't anyone tell me? But I think
Yeah.
my biggest issue was like, well, I had a few issues. First of all, I was like, this addiction doctor specialist, he's gonna murder me. So I need to leave him and get to someone else who's not gonna like murder me. So I went back to the
Yeah.
psychologist or psychiatrist. And then I was like just insanely looking for a chapter within the Ashton manual that does not exist. Like, what do I do when I came off too fast? Like, where do I go? What do I
Mhm.
do? All I now know is I need to do a slow taper, but I'm already at 5. I should have started at 45 or 120. Who knows? Like, what do
Yeah.
I even do? I was just clueless.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the plus the communities too. There's so much misinformation out there about reinstatements. I was in the same boat. I was 4 months out of a cold turkey off of everything, and I think part of the reason I was so injured and so protracted is because I was encouraged by people online to stay in that state, like it was some strongman contest or something, like stick it out, it'll eventually end, and I'm like, it's just only getting worse. It's not
Yeah,
getting better.
right.
So how do you figure out then, like you're going to reinstate? Well, I guess in your case, it's really an updose sort of because you're still on something, but it's,
Right.
reinstatement, updose, whatever the case. But yeah,
I think I'm still, I mean, I read the Asher manual on like how the F did this happen to me. And this is some evil, this is not a sleeping pill. This affects my entire body. This is
mm,
poison. I'm still like very motivated to come off. I'm like, I need to come off of this ASAP,
yeah,
but survive it some way. So I do try to taper. I'm not really active on the forum. I'm too sick to be on the forums. And I think I got down to maybe like 3.5 or something like that. And I'm like sick the whole time. And then I have this one window, which in my podcast I call like the oasis, because I didn't know the language for windows, waves, nothing. I feel
yeah,
somewhat normal. I'm not really sure when this is, maybe on 5. And that's when I discover Benzo buddies and I become somewhat active, but I'm like, there's not really anyone who can help me here with my situation. All I'm hearing is you need to do a slow taper. And I think most people, like, they're kind of uneducated like myself. So they're like, oh, maybe you should try micro tapering. I think with the gift of hindsight, someone should have said, like, whoa, you have done a way too rapid withdrawal. You should go up or at least hold, but do not cut. I didn't get
yeah.
that advice. So I kept on cutting, but it was just unsustainable. I just stopped sleeping, seizures. I had so many seizures. So
Oh my
it
God.
was just
Yeah. Once
horrible.
you've driven yourself so deep in the hole of withdrawal, like if you keep cutting, it's just deeper and deeper you go, it's like if you
Right.
don't come back out of it and then come down again slow when your body's ready. Yeah. So,
Right.
yeah. So you're still kind of tapering along, more seizures, and then,
Yeah. I
and
think,
then what?
for me, it started, I was like, okay, I guess I thought I was a rare case, and maybe with the seizures, it's somewhat rare, but, obviously I was like, I need to find people that lived through this. I need to find more information. I was like, I need to save myself because no one else is going to do it. No one knows about this. So it was kind of like a survival thing. I need to find other sources and stuff. So I started gradually finding things, people dying because of cold turkey benzo withdrawal. I think I stumbled upon Geraldine Burns' podcast at some point, and there were like 2 episodes. One was with a guy who did a quote, which linger still. He was like, oh, at some point I went to liquid because with the pills, there's only so much that you can do. And I'm like, okay, he did that like at 6 or 8 milligrams of Valium, something like that. And here I am cutting, slicing, and dicing the 2 milligram pills. Maybe that's not a sensible thing to do. So that was my lesson. I was like, okay, cutting is no option right now. Like physically cutting the pills, that is off the table now.
Yeah.
And then I hear this other person on the show who wrote a book, and she chose not to come off. I'm like, who does that? That's insane. Why would you choose not to come off your benzo? Like, I'm going to read that book once I get more than 1 or 2 hours of sleep. I ended up still reading the book, and I was like, oh, maybe I should just really hold for a really, really long time. Was still doubting. I got the 0.1 milligram tablets of my pharmacy. The last time that I did that I tried to taper from 5 to 4.9 was in last May. And then 1 week later, I stopped walking. I stopped sleeping. It's just crazy with me. So I'm just holding.
Wow. Okay. So what dose did you like land on? 5?
5. Yeah.
Okay. And decided to hold. And at some point, does your body kind of catch up and figure it out at 5? Like, do you feel stable? Do you feel like you're managing?
I'm doing my best. I do have to say that because I tried long holding on 4 after this horrible journey, which was way too rapid, but then I had seizures, and then because it's always kind of like a terrible thing to realize that you need to go up because you don't want to go up. You want to come off. But I was like, this is going to kill me. So I need to go up. And maybe I actually, with the gift of hindsight, I should have gone higher then, but I was like, okay, I'll do 5. It seemed to work for the person in the book that I read. I got a lot better. And for me, benzo withdrawal and bind so far is very nonlinear, but it got significantly better once I went to 5, because mind you, I had trouble walking. I couldn't move my legs for a long time. I was super weak and shaky and everything, but it's non-linear with me. I'll still have waves, but they're just not as severe as they were before. I haven't had seizures anymore ever since I went to 5. So I guess, these terminologies with stable and I would say I'm super functional. I guess that's the best kind of term for me right now. But obviously, I do hope that I get more stable to the point where I do get to taper again, because that is kind of like end game.
Yeah. You want off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
When you talk about the legs, you just brought me back to a memory where I was in my cold turkey. I'm at my grandmother's house and I try to get out of bed, and my legs don't even hold my weight. And I just collapse on the floor trying to stand. It was like baby deer legs or whatever, when they first try to walk. And I was like, what is this shit? Like, what are these pills and what have they done to me? Yeah. Unbelievable. So
it's crazy, but
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think what I really want to say is, for some odd reason, I chose to look for information in English, because maybe this is an international thing. Maybe I'm the only Dutch case around that has this. It saved my life, really digging deep and looking, seeing all the documentaries, medicating normal, as prescribed, the benzodiazepine medical disaster. It just validated all of my symptoms. So I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew that I had bind.
Yeah.
I was like, it saved me.
What about in your country? Is there anything that you found in, the language over there?
No, not something that would validate bind. So I think there's a forum, but no one visits that. I think if Dutchies go somewhere, they will go to Benzo Buddies. My insert pamphlets, all they say is you need to taper gradually, which I thought I was doing because I was doing it in a few days.
Yeah.
There is no warning. There's nothing. There's no website that says if you cold turkey this, you could die. You could have grand mal seizures and die. And then I go on YouTube and I see this story of a guy that goes to jail and he's being yanked off of Klonopin and he dies after having seizures for hours. So
Yeah,
No,
those are the
yeah,
lawsuits in the US that are successful, actually, the jail ones where they leave the person in the cell to die of
right,
Klonopin withdrawal or whatever. There's
right,
been multiple over here where people won, litigation against. I mean,
right.
you raise a good point too about, again, we're back to language. And I think this is where we have to do better in our advocacy and at our regulatory agencies and the doctors. It's like, how do you like verbally portray something to somebody that is this, like you read the pamphlet that comes with it, and like you said, the doctor said, well, you might get some dizziness. Well, the dizziness I had was like somebody put a stilt under my bed and then spun it,
Wow, yeah,
and it's like they just don't accurately portray to the person like the level of intensity of suffering that you can have, when you read inside of the manual that comes with the medication. So it's like, how do we tell people effectively that this is what they're potentially setting themselves up for,
yeah. I think it's hard to convey, but I think maybe the more important factor to me is what I've witnessed in psychiatry and my doctors and all of that. There was one psychiatrist who didn't gaslight me, but
Mhm.
everyone else did gaslight me. So it's kind of like also the human factor where I know that you're a doctor and you have a degree, but if I'm telling you that I found research that validates my complaints, my symptoms, and if you're like, oh, I've never read that, I didn't get that in my training, so I'm not going to go on Google and believe you. You're just, kind of like being submissive to my issues, you're kind of like discounting all of that. And
Yeah.
that's more kind of like, it's also you can be sympathetic and be like, okay, I believe you. Like that's maybe the more important thing. And maybe be honest, just say as a doctor, like I had like 1 hour of training for Benzo, so I don't know that much. Maybe you should go online.
Yeah, just admit you don't know. Like that's so,
Yeah.
there's lots of stuff that medical people don't know, like that's why we have specialties because I mean, think about how much time and energy you and I had to invest in reading and digging and talking to people
Right.
to become, like subject matter experts on benzos. It's a
Right.
lot,
It's a
and
lot.
so
Yeah.
for a doctor to be like the doctor for some disease, they have to really, invest and learn in it. So I don't hate anybody for not knowing this. That's not the mistake. It's that you refuse to learn or you refuse to listen when your
Right.
patient comes in and says like, here's all this journals, from all these different medical journals that are saying that this is real. And then you're just like, you're not going to read it. You're going to just tell me it's not real. That's just
Right.
unforgivable.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of resulted in me really leaving psychiatry and like being like, there's nothing that you can do to help me. I need to help myself. All I need is a prescription. And
Mhm.
whenever I feel like coming off, I'll come off. I just lost faith in psychiatry or doctors.
Yeah.
I'd rather, I wish I'd gone to a coach or something, like a benzo coach, something, but
Mhm.
I really got damaged by psychiatry and the medical community in this country. So, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's our tagline. No benzodiazepines, no one's coming to save you.
Yeah, it's
You
true.
have to save yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So
For sure. 100%.
so you're saving yourself now. You're holding at 5
Yes.
milligrams.
Yes.
What do you think, given your experience, of, some of the, black and white thinking that exists in the withdrawal communities, like, don't hold for more than a week or two, you'll be in tolerance. What is
Right.
your, yeah.
My opinion is that everyone has, which is true, that everyone has a unique journey. But I think when people are judgy that way is they don't really look at the full story of someone. And I've heard plenty stories where people reinstated and it saved them and they
Mhm.
got stable. So maybe there are some general like guidelines. No one will tell you to cut over 5%. So everyone will agree on that. So there is consensus. But some alternative things work for other people, and you could get bad advice within the community that exists. So I
Yeah.
think the best person that can give you advice is yourself. You need to educate yourself. and find a story that is somewhat similar to yours, or see what people, do. No one really knows how to help you.
Yeah. And you
That's
have
the
to
truth.
try things. I mean, I tell people
Yes.
all the time, like, the only way we get any data points on what's going to happen to you is for you to try
Right.
this. Like, just because Joe Schmo over here did this doesn't mean that you're going to have the same experience.
Exactly.
And people hold for long periods of time all the time and
Right.
regain some stability.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just think a lot of the black and white types, there's nothing in this is black and white.
No,
Everybody,
and
yeah.
what I also want to point out, what I didn't mention in my story, is that I got prescribed other drugs that were supposedly not addictive, and would possibly help me sleep, like Remeron, which is mirtazapine, Seroquel twice.
Mhm.
While I specifically asked for something that wouldn't be addictive, never responded to any of these drugs well. But I could have been a drug person now, and I'm just
Which,
on a benzo now. I mean, it's still
yeah,
awful. I still don't want to be on the benzo, but I also don't want to die. So,
yeah, yeah,
which is a big thing coming from me, because I think for a year I couldn't care less if I died.
exactly. Yeah, but at least, I mean, that's kind of the silver lining is you didn't turn into this polypharmacy
Yeah.
mess. Although for some people, taking something was like the one thing that allowed them to sleep. And then it's like, well, you know what? So what? You're stuck on Remeron now. It's the
Yeah.
same scenario. We learn how to micro taper you off of that one when your body's
Right.
ready.
And
So
I think, within the benzo, we do what we got to do to survive. Um, and I mean, we've already been through hell, so let's just be supportive with one another. And if someone would make a choice that maybe you wouldn't consider as the better choice, let them decide for themselves and just be nice. We don't
yeah,
need, we are already being judged by everyone else in the medical community. The last thing we need is the community turning on us or being opinionated. Is That's my opinion. Just be
yeah,
nice.
yeah, exactly. And I think in some cases it comes from a desperate desire to want to prevent harm in other people, like, don't ever add another drug, it could really mess you up. And it's like, yeah, it could, but there are some people who uh they're at the end of their rope, and they're not going to
Yeah.
go on anymore if they don't try something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we
Definitely.
have
I agree.
to let everybody do what works in their own scenario. I agree. All right. So then you decide you're going to be a podcaster.
Well, I didn't just decide to become a podcaster, but I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I almost died and people need to be warned. And because I never heard about this, I need to tell someone that these drugs are bad. And how do I even do this? And I think my first plan was to write a book in Dutch, because I was like, okay, apparently there are a few like American books or English written books. So maybe I will be the one that does a Dutch book. But
Yeah.
then as I started writing, I was like, this is going to be kind of like a multi-year thing for me, and I may not even make it. So maybe there's a way that I can just do like an audio message or something like that in Dutch, because I was like very focused on the Dutch language. And I was like Googling, how do I do that? And then, podcasting became more like of an option. I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. So I educated myself with Google. And was like, even though I was sick, I was like, I need to spread this message that this stuff is bad. And I really wanted to take my listeners with me in my journey of educating myself. So
Hmm.
I did a Dutch podcast, but then like 2 days later, another Dutchie did like a 10-part series where she interviews like psychiatrists about benzos and stuff like that. I was like, oh, there's already a Dutch podcast now. And on Benzo Buddies, they were like, oh, that's cool. Could you do one in English? I only knew about Geraldine's. I didn't know about D.E. Foster's yet.
Hmm.
And I just started doing that as my kind of own journey and finding things like, oh, I found this thing called bind, y'all. What is it? Let me read it aloud. And it's really me learning this whole thing with the benzos. And then I was like, oh, maybe it's cool to have people on. So I just reached out to some people, and then I had Dr. Christy Huff on, who I read her blog, but I didn't know she was the director of BIC. And then she came on the show, and then it just gained all this attention all of a sudden. I was like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
So it's still surreal sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, did it give you like purpose amidst the
Yes.
suffering as well? Yeah. I found that
Yes.
was so important for me. Like, people were like, oh, you're so active and you do all these things. And I'm like, yeah, that's not like an indicator of, how well
Mm-hmm.
I am by any means. In fact, it's an indicator of how sick I am because I have all this time to literally
Right.
But I also
Right.
I felt like I had to do it because yes, I wanted to educate people and, all the same motivations as you. Like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And everybody needs to know that it's
Right.
out there and to be informed about it. But also, like, I'm not somebody who can just lay around like in agony and stare at the wall. I had to have like my brain
Yeah.
needed to be engaged or I was going to die. Like, did you feel like doing the podcast was like your purpose?
Yeah, definitely. I was like, this is something that I can do in withdrawal, because especially if I'm just recording like personal episodes about my taper or hold or whatever is going on with me, I can do that whenever, with having guests on, it's kind of like, pushing, powering through sometimes. But
Yeah.
actually, the gift of having guests on is that I learn from my guests as I interview them. For example, you talk about neuro emotions. I'm like, that's the right word for what I'm, because I can be a raging bitch sometimes, like on my podcast when I'm like having a really bad day, like this is horrible, and
Mhm.
that's the neuro emotion. Or I'm really sad, or I'm really happy, but it's educational, and I have all Christy Huff on the show. That was very educational. I'm learning from all of these people and their journeys, so they're actually educating me. They're doing me a service by just having a chat with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also, just feel less alone. Like we have a little community. Well, not a little one, a big one. There's tons
Yeah,
of people, So yeah, incredible. I'm so glad that you did it and, are bringing more awareness and information to the Netherlands, even though, I mean, do most people, excuse my ignorance, but us Americans, we don't know
uh-huh.
enough about other countries, but do
So I've
most people
heard.
speak, English
They
in the
do. I
Netherlands?
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we get it at school. I mean, my accent is kind of rare, I would say, but which is kind of a blessing and a curse, because sometimes Americans will think they can just say everything and that I would understand everything. And but sometimes I have to like check, like, what does a potluck mean? Or something that you
Oh,
said on my show, like, what is it? What does it mean? Is something Christmassy? I don't know. For example,
oh,
I'm like, I would have to look that up later. But most Dutchies speak pretty well English, or read it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
most of
So,
us.
I
Yeah.
mean, you didn't really have to do the podcast in your native language, for you to reach people there.
Yeah, not
Mhm.
necessarily. I'm not really sure with like older people if their English is like as good. But we get it in school. But it was just with English, it's just like I get to interview everyone.
Mhm.
It became more of an international thing. I obviously have had most people from America on as guests, but it's kind of more fun this way to have like an international audience to do it with.
Yeah, exactly. And plus then we get friends, it's people all over the world. Like I'm exposed to people that I probably never would have met or learned about,
Right.
had this not have happened to me. So it's been, there's silver linings for sure too.
Definitely. And at least there's I think I did an episode about it, but basically I'm like, everyone that does something within our community is leaving a legacy for the next generations. Unfortunately, if they do come, like other generations, at least our work will still be online and they'll be able to find it or through a book or whatnot. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's way more now than it was when I showed up, in 2010, it was like nothing. Like
Right.
one guy on YouTube, screaming into the abyss and I was like, "Oh, wow." And now it's like
Right.
in the news and like we've really made
Yeah.
progress. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just so
I
grateful
wanted
for everyone, including yourself, for doing so much for the cause.
yeah, me too, so much. Why did you call it Benzotired? Just because you were not sleeping or
Also,
yeah.
while I was I've been tired for 7 years now. This is my seventh
Mhm.
year on the benzo. But interesting, no one asked me this before. But because, as I told you, I started in Dutch, and there's kind of like a pun with Ben. It means am, and
Mhm.
zo is so. So when you say it in Dutch with tired, which is moe, it's I'm so tired. I am so tired.
Yeah.
Benzo is am so. So there was a pun, but then when I switched to English, I just made it benzo tired. Like, kind of catchy still. I mean, everyone is
Yeah.
tired in benzo withdrawal. Most of us are tired in benzo
Oh,
withdrawal or in bind. So
not just tired physically, but like sick and tired of this freaking
yes.
shit. Like, when is it
Yeah,
going to end? I'm so goddamn tired of doing this and
exactly.
thinking
Yeah.
about it and all of it. Yeah, it's perfect.
Well, I think my silver lining is because I've had such a severe withdrawal that first year and almost dying and all of these horrible symptoms. My silver, even though I still have like 2 or 3 years to go, I think. But my silver linings for me and what motivates me is that I was sick and tired for 5 years, not knowing why that was, or thinking what it was my tinnitus. But now I know it's because of this drug. So
Mhm.
once I heal from this, injury caused by the drug, I know I'll get better again. So at least I know the
Yeah.
problem. I didn't know for five. No one told me. I was like, okay, now I know the problem.
Yeah, I mean, we could have lived another, 10, 15, 20 years like some of these people do and show up when you're like 70 or 80, only figuring it out. And then what? Like you've got to do this as an elderly person?
Yeah,
People have said to me, like, well, why didn't you just stay on? And I'm like, because I was so ill on the drugs too,
right,
like at least this path has like a light at the end of the tunnel. I hope I heal from this, at least we have a injury that has hopefully a positive ending, that we can get our lives back on the other side. Like if you had like stage 4 cancer or something, it doesn't always end that
right,
way. So,
right.
yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Um, all right. So to close, I guess I want to talk about you mentioning to me that you might take some legal action against your physician. What does
I'm
that look
intending
like?
to. Yeah.
Mhm.
How to, I mean, I keep it a little bit secret for the show, but what I can share publicly, because, I was like, at some point, like, oh, everyone's going to listen is going to be able to listen to the podcast. So I need to like put a paywall at some of these episodes because who knows, the Dutchies may like dig and whatever.
Mhm.
The current state of affairs is that I've hired this medical bureau with
Mhm.
medical experts. They're going to review my file, which is full of, in my opinion, smoking guns. Like my
Yeah.
GP got warning several times and just prescribing that vast amount of benzos for years on end and Versed and all that stuff, and the cold turkeying with the Z drug.
Yeah.
They're going to review the file. And if they deem it like that I could get a success from suing my lawyer, I will definitely sue my GP. I will definitely sue my GP. So I'm waiting on that, but I'm definitely gonna give my all into suing my GP.
Yeah. And what's the timeline you think on getting an answer back from them?
January. I'll get an answer in January, and then if they say, okay, this is a viable case, then my lawyer would have to prepare the case, and
Okay.
then maybe that will take a year or 2 or 5. I have no
Yeah.
idea, but I
Nothing
cannot let
happens
this
fast
slide.
in legal land, but still,
Right.
I think it's, I think it was Malcolm Lader, if you're familiar with him. He's
Yeah, I saw the
deceased now.
Benzodiazepine medical disaster. He said it's only going to stop if we sue them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, it's activism in its own way, even though, like all of us deserve compensation. Um, a lot of them here in the United States, like they put I don't know the right legal term. Is it like gag order or something like that? Like you're not allowed to talk about
The NDA.
uh well, when you sometimes in the US when you win a legal case, like they'll award you the money, but only on the terms of like you're not allowed to speak publicly about it, which is kind of a
Right.
loss for advocacy because we want to be able to say like,
Yeah,
you
I'm not
know,
doing that. I'm not going to settle for that. I want to win and share that.
yeah.
Like you, Montague. If you, I'm not
Luke, yeah.
Luke. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I want to do that.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can get
All
there.
right. Well, fingers crossed. We'll be looking for your
Thanks.
information and I'm sure you'll keep everybody posted on your podcast,
I definitely
what's
will.
happening.
Yeah.
So before we go, how can people support Benzotired? We'll put a link to it if you want to listen. Spotify is the best place to listen, but I know
Yeah.
like just doing work for medicating normal, for BIC, I mean, every um every initiative that people take on, it needs funding, it needs, support because these things aren't free. It costs. So if
Yeah.
somebody wants to like donate to support you to keep Benzotired going, where can they go or how can they do that?
Oh, yeah. There's a link for like a PayPal thing on my website, which is benzotired.jimdo.com. And what I've added is like personal episodes ever since I like started to hold on 5. People can like do a paid subscription every month for like $3.99, and they get access to the exclusive episodes.
Oh, cool. Okay. So
Yeah.
spell out the website though, because I missed the like Jimdo part. What is that?
Okay, so yeah, it's because it's free because
Oh,
then else I'd have to pay money, and it would be .nl. I can get .com, so it's benzotired JIMDO SITE.com,
okay.
jimdosite.com.
Okay. We'll link it too for
Okay,
anybody
great,
listening.
great,
Yeah.
great.
All right, Naftal, well, we're running out of time here. I guess we'll close. I just wonder if you have any like last thoughts or anything you want to say before we wrap up.
Gosh. Well, I think I want to thank everyone that's listening to my podcast, everyone viewing this channel, everyone supporting. I think it's so great that we have a community, and keep on going. If you're looking, if you're listening, whatever you're doing, keep on going, and so we can spread the word.
Yeah,
And thank
perfect.
you so much, Nicole, for hosting.
Yeah, sure. And I'm gonna keep following your story over at Benzotired because I want to know how it
Thanks.
ends when you get off
Thanks.
the last five and the, legal stuff and everything like
Yeah.
that. So definitely
Yeah.
keep us posted.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you haven't seen Medicating Normal yet and you want to, you can go to medicatingnormal.com/watch for the many ways you can watch it. Stay tuned because it's going to be free soon. I know everybody's been anxiously waiting for the film to be free, and we're almost there. We've got it in many different languages, not just the subtitles, but we actually went in and we put anything that was like in text or graphics in the native language to the language that we're doing. So we hope to reach even more people with the film soon. Thanks again, Naftal, for joining me today. We will see you guys soon. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.